And I think we're probably about there. It should be loading. Okay. All right. We got it. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's Uncle Grumpy, and welcome to Grumpy Tonight. Tonight, we're here with the OBNDD spokesman, Mr. Mark Woodward. Mark, thank you for joining me. Let's just say hello and tell me how your new year is going while I share this to a few other places before we get too far into this.
Well, it's going good. And I think I probably speak for everybody watching that we all hope and pray that 2021 is less challenging than what we just had to navigate in 2020. So we got through it. Sadly, many of us probably know somebody that in their family didn't have such a good year, but praying things go better in 2021. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's hope with the vaccine out there, we'll at
Yeah,
least we'll get a better situation going. Let's see.
absolutely. Yep, it was a difficult year, no doubt. So
All right. Well, that's not working right for me there on that phone. So we're going to skip that for now. I'll get around to sharing that later. Folks, if you're watching, do me a favor and share this, please. We got quite a few jumping on already. Okay, Mark, let's go ahead and get started. One of the reasons why I've asked you to come on here tonight is you're always really good about giving us the inside scoop on what the OBNDD is seeing in the industry as far as illegal activities or out of state activities and the industry. You seem to be a good inside source for that sort of thing. You're always willing to share that information with us. And I've seen some stories about some immigrants, a lot of migration of immigrants that are even as far as what I'm hearing are sleeping in the house in the hoop houses where the cannabis is growing and being paid very low wages and almost like slave labor. This is the main reason why I reached out to you. I wanted to see if we could find out, is there any truth to this, to what I'm hearing, and how deep is this going, and throw into that anything you might know about this, the buy up of land. I'm hearing that land is going for bare land is going for inflated prices, and they're putting some of these people on that land and just waiting to get their grow going. Is this where we're at now?
well, it is, but first of all, I can't stress enough of the almost 9,000 licensees that we have, whether they're a grower or a dispensary. 99% are doing everything right. So, we're talking about a small percentage of potential bad actors that get on OBN's radar. And I can't say enough about everybody from the industry itself to OMMA, all working together over the last 2.5 years to really roll out one of the best products that we possibly could when it came to medical marijuana in such a short period of time. And it's good, but it's also bad in a way because it is attracting, because Oklahoma is doing such a good job and has so much in place already, and maybe less bureaucracy and even some cheaper pricing on licenses than many other states, that a lot of people are pulling up their stakes in other states from California to Michigan, and they're coming here. And with that, you're going to have some very good people who are going to do everything right, but you're also going to have some bad actors that are going to come here thinking, well, it is so busy in Oklahoma. There are so many licensees, they can't keep track of it. And maybe we can fly under the radar in Oklahoma long enough to continue our criminal operation. And those are the ones that I want to talk about, not those that are doing it right. They're doing a great job, and we appreciate that. But these criminal organizations who are in some cases buying up land, they're growing. They're using, as you said, a lot of illegals who are here just looking for a better life, being able to send money back home to their family, but they're being forced to work terrible conditions. And it's all for these criminal organizations who are sending every bit of the finished product, the raw marijuana, out of state, and in some cases, oils and other products. But for the most part, you're talking about processed high potency marijuana that's going to the black market in other states along the East Coast. And those are the ones that have our attention, and they're certainly out there. But you see that in any industry, though. I can't stress that enough either. You're going to have people, whether they're coming from Mexico, coming from Southeast Asia that are coming to the United States, end up in Oklahoma hoping or promised a job, but then end up working what you and I might see as terrible conditions. And
Okay,
we've been
okay. Mark, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
no, no,
I want to bear down on some of what you're talking about. So I've
yes.
got a few questions. Like you talk about how you're finding it's the ones that are running illegal operations that, for the most part, that you're seeing are sending the product out of state. Also, they're just what are they growing under our licenses? Is that it, or are these people who were doing this here illegally already? Or because, I'm hearing this is some of the larger companies that might be doing some of this, some of the bigger names that have moved. Is that not the case? Is this more of just the cartel type industry? Is that what this is, or what is this?
Well, I think you get a little bit of both, but what's concerning, Chris, is we don't know what we don't know. Um, we are a complaint-driven agency, so we can't just randomly go out to everybody's, farms and businesses and check the IDs and current U.S. status of their employees. So we rely on complaints, whether it's from neighbors, a competing business, or maybe even somebody who was working on that farm who knows intimately the details of the conditions, the payment or lack thereof, the licensing or lack thereof. But in most cases, what we're talking about are those who are, some of them have done the paperwork and they have done everything right, but yet it's all a criminal organization. There's a few of those. There's some who may have only gotten an OMMA license and then started growing, and they're so new to Oklahoma. As I said, they're pulling up stakes and coming here from other states that they didn't realize they need an OBN license, so they were operating illegally without a license from us. And then the third category, those who came here, they bought up land, they started planting plants, and they never even bothered to get an OMMA or an OBN license. And so you have a combination of all three of those scenarios here in Oklahoma. But for the most part, the majority of the finished product, the harvested marijuana, is not going to dispensaries or processors here in Oklahoma. It's going in vehicles, semi
Okay.
trucks to the East Coast.
Okay, so let me ask you a little more directly. I know of, and we all do, of companies that are operating in multiple states, Oklahoma being one of them. Okay, let's assume all the licensing is fine. It's an Oklahoma business. They've just bought the use of the name or whatever that may be. Okay, are you finding any cases of those companies shifting their workers from state to state depending on where their harvest is? I'm wondering, are these larger companies also bringing in their own workers beyond the ones that move here? Are they bringing in seasonal workers as well? It's a slightly different question, but it's
Sure.
not. It's the same group of people. The
Some of them are
workers are the same people.
right, and some of them, yes, seasonal, but some are coming with the company that may have, for whatever reason, decided that California is not where we want to be growing any longer. And they buy land here and they start working in Oklahoma, and then they bring along some of the same employees who've been working for them in California. And when they moved from California and started a farm in New Mexico, and then for whatever reason, either that didn't work out or they got kicked off the land, whatever the scenario, they left New Mexico and came here and brought their workers with them. We're talking about them being the ownership group that bought land, and then when they're as many of those workers as they can talk into coming with them, they will come here. So you do have some of that where they're seasonal, but you have some that are just basically they're full-time workers, and others who are just desperate for work, and somebody through word of mouth says, I've got some guys in California, let me make a call, see if we can get them out here. And again, a lot of them are illegal, undocumented, and many of them don't know where they're at. We've seen that with other types of human trafficking and labor trafficking. They don't know whether they're in Oklahoma or Oshkosh, Wisconsin. They just know that here's their job, they're paid to do this. And if they do the job, they get money and they're able to send some of that back home to their family. So, it's sad that some of the living conditions that we've seen at a few of these farms. Now, not all of them. Some of them, they're set up in trailers, and we've been to some farms that we've inspected, and they were in pretty good shape. And then there were some others where we thought it was kind of, you got a lot of people living in a small confined space that's not very inhabitable and what we might find deplorable. But then you speak to these workers, and many of them say, I'm not a victim of labor trafficking. As bad as you Americans say this is, you should have seen what I left back home, whether it was in Mexico or Southeast Asia. And so they're willing participants, and therefore they're not going to claim victims, and we can't really help them as far as labor trafficking.
What do you do in that circumstance? I'm just curious since you brought that up. What do you do in the circumstance where the person being trafficked is either too afraid or it's better off than they were because it was so deplorable where they were? Not to
Absolutely.
think for a minute that they've got it good there, they may or may not, or
Right.
here, they may or may not, but where they came from obviously was terrible. Do you find a lot of that where they say what you're saying, and what do you do at that point?
Well, certainly we document it. We visit with them, get their information. We try to track down the owners, and sometimes that can be difficult too because they play these shell games with ownership, where obviously you have to have the local ownership requirement here, but sometimes they're just paying somebody to be the face of the farm and put their name on the paperwork. But when the real actual owners, you can't even track them down. They're not even from Oklahoma, and so sometimes getting information about the backgrounds of these employees, there's oftentimes very little, if any, record keeping. You can't trust the records that they have on their employees. And many of these employees, as I said, don't speak English. They're, a lot of them are scared to talk to us because they've been, for want of a better term, indoctrinated to don't trust law enforcement because you're here illegally. And if you speak to the law enforcement, you're going to be deported and you're going to lose your meal ticket for your family. And so if you can start to get them to open up a little bit about that, then yeah, Chris, we're talking about labor trafficking because now they're basically through fear and coercion, they're being forced to work. But again, many of them are just going to smile and say, no, I love my job because we believe a lot of them are afraid. But at the same time, a lot of them are afraid to lose their job because that's the money for them and their family.
Okay, well, this is a good segue in the next question I want to ask you about, which is the inspections that you're doing. And I'll get more specific, but the security inspections you've been doing, they've been picking up from what I understand. And I'm curious as to what kind of situations you're finding as far as what's the most common mistakes, not from the traffickers. Okay, we'll move away from the
Right.
illegal part of the activity. Let's start to help some of these people out here that are doing it right, that need some answers on how we're getting it right. So the places that I remember before you mentioned the problems were maybe lack of fencing, grows in places, and I had friends that were in that circumstance that were late getting up their fence. But beyond that, everything they were doing, they were trying to do right. Maybe they had part of their fence, working on the rest. This friend of mine's got all his fence now, by the way, so you don't have to go see him again. But I'm just curious. Let me know what are the most common um, mistakes being made in say security and other things you're finding at the grows that are trying to do it right.
Well, first of all, I'll say too, we're going to work with these people. If there's an effort, if we do an inspection, it's oftentimes driven by a complaint, whether it's a neighbor across the street, whether it might be a competing farm that says, we're doing everything right. We've got the right fencing up and security. And you look across the street at a competitor's farm and you can see plants as far as the eye can see and no fence whatsoever except 3-strand barbed wire. We will go out and we're going to talk with them, first of all, find out what are the deficiencies, make sure they understand what the security features are, and then we're going to give them time to correct that. We're not going to immediately shut them down. We're going to work with them. If there's a good faith effort for them and say, yes, I've got that fencing material, it's ordered, and we should have it up within the next 2 to 3 weeks. We will say, fine, you go ahead and do that, and we'll schedule a time to come back out here in about 3 or 4 weeks, make sure that's been taken care of. It's the ones who make no effort to put up a fence. They make no effort to get an OMMA or OBN license. They don't think that the rules apply to them. Those are the ones who are going to be less forgiving, and there's not very many. As I said from the very beginning, 99% of the businesses are doing it right, or they're at least trying to do it right. And there's going to be oopses. Maybe somebody didn't realize, hey, if the plants can be seen from the public, there has to be some sort of fence obscuring the view. to a degree. So we'll work with them, absolutely. But those are some of the most common violations, is they simply don't have the right type of fencing, and that's surprising. And it even surprises a lot of people in the industry who say, I've gone above and beyond on the fence because I don't want my plants stolen or damaged by animals or anybody sneaking through. So a lot of them are going above and beyond what the rules say anyway, just to protect their investment. But there are some that have very little money invested whatsoever in fencing, and that's kind of surprising. But
So
fencing,
what are the most common? Oh, and let me tell everybody while I'm interrupting you again, sorry. First, everybody, please share this if you're watching. And let's remind everybody what we're talking about right now. This fencing we're talking about is commercial fencing. So all of you home growers, that's another subject. That's not Mark's issue.
right?
That's not the OBNDD's issue. So we'll get somebody on here to talk about the home grow issue very soon. But go ahead, back to what you
Yeah,
were saying.
yeah, the
What is the
fencing,
most
some of the security requirements as far as gates and having the facility, whether you're talking about a farm or a dispensary, that makes sure that they've got some sort of monitoring system. And again, most of this you're preaching to the choir. Most of them say, I already have all that because I've got too much money invested in it, and I don't want to worry about theft either from outsiders or even my own employees. So a lot of them say I already go above and beyond what the state requires. But sometimes there's issues with security. Others, it's record keeping. And that's something that's just going to take time, but people do need to keep records and submit their monthly reports to OMMA and OBN. And that is just simply so we can track it. But it's also, again, the businesses say, oh, I keep methodical records because I want to know if some of my employees might be, either I'm short on cash or short on product. And so some of them are doing incredible jobs on their record keeping. And so that's not an issue. But then you have the more serious violations. And there's been some businesses that we have shut down because it's not that their license was expired, it's that they never made an effort to get an OBN or an OMMA license. They simply came, bought some land, got a greenhouse, started planting plants, and then they started moving it from store to store. And then you also have the serious violations where it's not even being sold in Oklahoma, it's going in semi trucks out of state. So some of those more serious violations, we're not going to work with you.
Now, I'm curious on the commercial grows. Are they required to have monitoring systems, as in cameras,
some type of monitoring system. Yes,
on
cameras
their grows or on their entrance or what?
on the entrance, some type of a monitoring system. Some of them have alarms. Some of them use cameras, like you see on hunting fences. Leases.
Most of them I know have cameras. I just didn't know they were required. Like you said, most of the ones I know have gone above and beyond,
Right.
because of their investment.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about record keeping. This is a good way to go down a big rabbit hole. The seed to sale. What's your take on that? This new
Well,
metric, I guess, is this metric thing tied up right now, or where are we
right.
moving forward with metric? Where are we with that?
Well, this is going to be something that OMMA is going to be rolling out, and so it's really not an OBN, anything that we have say so over, but we're certainly very much looking forward to it. And I know that the staff over at OMMA has been working very hard to get that a procedure and a product in place for seed to sale, so that we can easily track where the product's going. It'll help certainly with record keeping, but from a law enforcement perspective, really help us differentiate between those who are doing it right and those who are in it only for the criminal side of it. So we're excited about that's coming, and from what we hear from our partners at OMMA, it's not too far down the road.
Okay, well, we're going to keep talking about that, especially as it rolls out. I'm going to have a lot of questions about how that's being implemented and what they're monitoring. I mean, like, I'm curious, when do the tags have to go on the plants? At what height? Do you know yet?
Yeah, right. No, that'll be up to OMMA.
Yeah.
Yeah, and possibly I sit on the state medical marijuana food safety standards board. That could be some things that come up with the board, but I believe it's going to end up being OMMA rules that will distinguish that. And if people are wondering, I can tell you most of the rules that we have in place in Oklahoma, whether you're talking about OMMA, OBN, or even on the state level, have come from models in other states. So if you're wondering what Oklahoma's will look like, you can probably look at some other states that have the tag requirements, and most likely Oklahoma's is going to be very, very similar.
Okay. Not a lot of people happy about that. I don't know how it's going to play out. We'll see. A little concerned about it. Most people tell me that know about it that it's easy to cheat. It's not going to stop anything. That's just going to make work more difficult. Add another person that has to do nothing but keep records. I
Yep.
mean, I know places now that, and they've been like this since the beginning, have hired one person who does nothing but read the stuff from you guys in the OMA and try and a compliance officer, and
Right.
that's their only job is trying to keep them legal.
Right.
And I'm a little concerned. This is now we're going to have somebody else, another employee, which is going to add to the cost.
Sure.
All right. So let's see. What else have you got for us, Mark? I've gotten some notes here, something about some dual registration requirements. Can you tell me what that's about?
Right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there were some people that have come from other states and they got their OMA license and didn't realize that in Oklahoma, under our state law, and it goes back to 1975, that anybody that dispenses, administers, stores, manufactures, produces any type of a controlled substance has to have an OBN license registration. And ours is the same whether you're a pharmacy, whether you're a wholesale manufacturer like a McKesson drug or Cardinal drug, to medical marijuana processors, manufacturers, and or a dispensary. And so, what one of the things that we tell people, though, that it is really to help us have some teeth in the law, because if this requirement was not there, we would not have the ability to take some of the administrative and even in criminal action that we've been able to take against some of these bad actors who, as I said earlier, don't think that 788 applies to them. But having a registration from our agency, it gives us the ability to inspect. It gives us the ability to retrieve their records. We can work with them rather than just having to file straight up criminal charges if they're violating the laws. Now we can look at them and say, okay, we can work with you. We can give you 30 days. We can possibly look at a fine or even a suspension or a probation. So it gives us some abilities that the state law wouldn't, by going through our rules process for those who are either simply made a mistake or those who are blatantly violating the law. So we believe that dual registration has been very critical to give us some more teeth from a law enforcement perspective, not just a regulatory perspective. There's regulations that's needed, but for some of these egregious criminal organizations, they need full out law enforcement. And we need to be able to have that ability so that we don't become a beacon of or safe haven for bad actors in other states to say, hey, go to Oklahoma, it's cheaper, and there's very little oversight.
Well, I want to say, first off, I've been just extremely blessed by our friendship since we've gotten to know each other. I've been just thrilled by the fact that I've gotten the honor of getting to know someone like you. But I want to point out we come from two different worlds,
Mhm.
and my world was very worried about your world getting into this industry. And I think for the most part, um, it's been extremely easy.
Well, and it's been a
You've
two-way
always,
street. As I said, 99% of these businesses are doing it right. And if a business is following the law, they will never see an OBN. It's much like a pharmacy. A pharmacy that's following the law, we have no complaints or need for an audit.
yeah.
We may go an entire career and never step foot on that pharmacy property because they're doing everything right. And so we'll stay in our lane, and the medical marijuana industry has stayed in their lane. And as I said, 99% of the time, everybody's getting along great. And it's really has become a model for the country, but we don't want a few of those bad actors, especially coming out of state thinking, let's go to Oklahoma. We don't want them spoiling what we've got going here the last 2.5 years.
Yeah. Now it's been, like I said, it's been great. And the only complaints I've ever heard about the OBNDD has been how long it takes to get licensing sometimes. Currently, just throw it out there. What is the current wait time? If somebody was to turn in their paperwork tomorrow, how long would they be looking at in before their license is sent out?
Probably anywhere from about 2 to 4 weeks now. There was a point where it was about 4 to even 8 weeks because as I said, we have 9,000 businesses registered with us, and they were all coming in that big initial rush that first year and a half. And we only have so many people that can do backgrounds on the ownership, and we don't even require pre inspections. Some states you have to have
Yeah.
the facility. there were some that just did the paperwork. They didn't even have a land, they just had a deep GPS coordinate, but we still green lighted them as long as their background came back okay. But we just had so many. But now you're talking about 2 to 4 weeks, and you have to renew your registration every October 31st. It'll expire. That's all done online now as well. And that can take as little as 5 minutes.
Okay, something you and I talked about back at the beginning has, we'll take this out of the ownership, to the employees. We talked about this rule about the felony rule, and it was going to require, if you had a felony in the last 2 years or 5, depending on whether it was violent or not, it was going to require for the employees, not just the owners, but for the employees, permission from you guys. And you and I talked about that at the time, and you eased all my concerns by letting me know how easy it was going to be. I'm curious, and I haven't gotten any feedback on this. Have you seen a lot of requests in that area, and how easy has it been? How's that played out?
Oh, it's been very easy because a lot of them know the rule, and so they're not even going to bother applying if they don't fit into that. We've had some that say, "Well, I have a felony, but it was in 2008," and we're telling them again, it's 2 years for a felony, 5 years for a violent felony. But when we ran the backgrounds on some of these individuals, and not very many, we ended up finding warrants and out of state warrants, and we didn't. That doesn't even disqualify you. We simply told the person, if you go out of state and get that warrant taken care of, you can reapply, and many of them did. I think I can think of maybe 3 cases. And again, we're talking about over 9,000 businesses that have applied with us. I can think of 3, I believe, that were denied because of criminal nature, because, and a couple of them had, there was like child molestation kind of warrants out of other states. I mean, it was egregious stuff that we ended up denying because they lied on their application, and that's not going to cut it. So when you're talking about just a handful out of nearly 9,000, the issue of felonies and backgrounds and previous, bad choices in no way has it inhibited very many people from being able to go down this journey.
Well, that's good to hear. I haven't heard counter to that, so I'm betting that it's played out pretty good, or I would have heard something by now.
Now I'm talking about the owners. The owners are then going to hire employees, and right. That's another issue that's really outside of our jurisdiction.
Right.
And most of them have said that they do their own backgrounds because they don't want to hire somebody they can't trust, and that's certainly understandable. So a lot of the owners themselves are taking care of the employee side of it.
Yeah, I just hate to think some owners are not hiring people with cannabis felonies to work in the cannabis industry. That is concerning. And I know cases where that happens. I know owners that have told me they won't hire any felons regardless. And that's troubling. It's really troubling. It's another reason why we've got to finish fixing this. Okay, Mark, let's pretend that nobody else is watching, okay? And you and I are just talking and exchanging notes, and let's talk about legislation coming down the pike. What do you see happening this legislative session from your angle in any changes?
Well, I think one of the things on our wish list, there's a couple of them. But I think number one is right now we want to be able to take administrative action. As I said before, there's some people that just have an oops. And so we want to be able to either fine them or suspend them rather than doing a full-blown criminal, seizing their plants and arresting them. But if they're not a registrant with us, right now the way the law says is they have a license with us, and we can look at administrative penalties for violations, or they're not a licensee of us, and therefore they fall under Title 63, the criminal side. And there's some that need to be, as I said, there's criminal organizations operating without a license, and they have no desire to get a license. But if we can change the law, and we've spoken to our legislators about this, where we can take administrative action against a business that's not yet licensed with us, then that gives us more avenue and wiggle room to work with them if they simply made some violations versus having to just go with the Title III cultivation charges, which means seizing their plants and potentially filing criminal charges. There's some that need that, but there's many that do not.
So that's something you'll be pushing for this.
We're talking to our legislators about possibly allowing administrative action for non-licensees in this. That's one of our big ones. We're seeing a lot of trafficking of the concentrates out on the highway, And the law just right now is really, really fuzzy. It's pretty easy. If you get a semi tractor trailer full of Mexican marijuana of 2,000 pounds, we know how to file that. But say you get a truckload of illegal uh, extract that's going from California to New York, and we get it in a semi truck. We don't really have a trafficking weight for it, and being able to do that. So we want to work with our legislators at some point down the road to deal with trafficking of the concentrates, to at
There
least
wasn't a,
clarify it
I
in the
know there was
state.
a trafficking weight before. Was that just on flour?
Yeah, it's more difficult, and there's different there's kind of a gray area, because some will say, well, do you weigh the whole package? Like, say it's oil, but it's inside a cartridge, and that cartridge is inside a box with 2,000 other cartridges. Are you weighing the whole box and the plastic, and there's a lot of discrepancies, and we want to be able to clarify it, and we'll probably be working with the industry itself to kind of come up with what would be common sense legislation for those who are trafficking illegal non-flower marijuana products out on our highways and through
Okay.
Oklahoma.
Okay, I can tell you from talking to people that do that for a living, and I talked to some. I tried to get something done about this last year, and probably trying to get an amendment in there somewhere about this year. But they need to be able to make invoices on the fly. Um, I think you and I may have talked about this in the past, where they have to, they have to have an invoice before they leave. It has to have a destination. I mean, we're narrowing down so much on this transportation, and you're talking about transportation across state lines, but
Right. And again, we're talking about illegal transportation.
right,
There are,
right, but
you
it's
can have
coming,
a,
but it's rolling down the pike into
right.
our industry, into the
Yep.
people we have in vans full of things that are, are going to dispensaries, and they may or may not have the exact invoice
Right.
for every gram of everything on there. I have someone in the industry recently, a friend who we all saw his video. His drivers were, their stuff was unloaded out in the highway and then put back in. They were taken to jail. It was unloaded at the precinct, then put back in when they finally had to let him
Right.
go. I mean, just,
Yeah. And just a
and
little bit
my
of,
concern is, and I want to stay close with you on this year, is whatever you guys do in this area doesn't just roll out in more paperwork for this guy.
right.
We
Yeah.
need to find some way, and you could probably help me do that. Find some way to lighten up on the paperwork they're having to do at this point. Again,
Yeah.
they should be able to go to a dispensary, and if that owner changes his mind, they need to be able to change that order, because sometimes that's what determines whether or not they even make the sale.
Sure. And that's pretty easy to determine even there on the side of the highway, much like a truck driver right now who's got a manifest of what exactly is supposed to be in his trailer. And if it's off by a little bit, you've got a phone number usually at the other end. You can call where it left and where it was going, and they can verify absolutely this truck's supposed to be here. It's the black market. Those loads that are coming through Oklahoma are the ones we're concerned about. There is no paperwork. You can't contact anybody on one end or the other to verify it. And so in many cases, law enforcement, even if the guy's claiming it's a legal shipment, he has zero documentation, no manifest, and no contact person for us to even call and verify it. And so it ends up being a hassle where the truck's being seized or impounded, and this guy's having to call a lawyer just because somebody didn't do any paperwork on it, and left law enforcement with no way to verify that this guy truly is going with a legal load across country. But those are very, very rare. Most of them are pretty easy to tell because it's going to be in a hidden compartment in a passenger vehicle. Those are the types of ones that we're talking about that we run into, where there's no doubt there's nothing legal about that load.
Well, again, I really think it'll do us all well for you and I to stay in close contact this year,
We look forward to it.
to
Absolutely.
make sure the things that I'm trying to suggest don't interfere with your life any more than necessary, and the things you're trying to suggest don't
Absolutely.
interfere with ours. So
Our officers have
this
better
could
things to
work.
do than being on the side of the road. That's why I said these guys that we pull over for whatever reason and they got the paperwork, we're sending them down the road in 4 or 5 minutes. Because they took the time, they had the paperwork, and it's all good to go.
Did you
And
see the video about the one I'm talking about?
I believe I have.
It was Isaac.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
believe I've seen clips of that.
yeah, it was pretty bad, pretty
Yeah.
crazy. All right, okay. What other legislation are you going after? You want a little bit of control so you can do some administrative fines rather than just go straight to handcuffs, That's
Right.
good. I am concerned though about how that plays out alongside the seed to sale program, and that's what I'm going to be watching you for, to
Right.
see if the seed to sale turns into a money stream for the OBNDD. That's what I'll be looking for, Mark, right
Well,
there.
like I
That's
said,
it.
we're totally out of the seed to sale. That'll be OMMA. So
Right. But if
the
you're in a
seed to
place where you're
sale,
doing
the
administrate, but if you're in a place where you're doing administrative fines, we'll just be
right.
watching. We'll just be watching for that.
Right, but that won't fall under our rules and regs.
Okay.
Our rules and regs are very narrow, and it deals with the security,
Okay.
the issues that we talked about earlier with the
Well,
fencing, the
you're always
security.
getting off the hook way too
Yeah,
easy here. Way too
yeah.
easy. All right. What other legislation are you?
Really, that's it for us. I know I watched, like many of your viewers probably did, the interim study about 2, 3 weeks ago up at the Capitol, and most of the legislation and some of the wish lists that were on there dealt with patients and things that really are outside OBN's jurisdiction anyway. So we didn't have a big wish list up there, and we'll watch some of the other legislation being filed, but. We've been pretty confident. Most of the legislation is run that we completely agree with. It's Representative Fedgatter is one of them that's easy to work with, and if he supports it, then there's a really good chance that the Bureau of Narcotics is going to have no issues with it because
Oh,
he's
he'll
very
love hearing that. He'll
yeah.
love hearing that. That's for you,
Well.
Scott.
He's not going to put his name on something he doesn't believe in either.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah,
know. He's a great guy.
yeah.
Okay. And the last thing I want to get to, um, Dr. Pasternak has asked me to bring up the opioid issue. Now, I was talking to somebody recently, in fact, just earlier today, about um, I got a message recently that the only uh, what methadone clinic in Lawton closed, and I'm seriously concerned that they've already got a meth problem down there. We have an opioid problem in the state. Cannabis did not cure that problem because we didn't roll out a program that the doctors are willing to get on board with. We won't go down that road, but I will say that we now have to figure out how to move forward. And I'm afraid more legislation might come around that makes I guess I'm not sure how to wrap this into a question. What, from the state's perspective and from your perspective, can we do to work with this opioid and cannabis miscommunication that doctors seem to be having, that they're going to get in legal trouble? You guys are a legal arm. The doctors, they have a license through you because of the opioids. Now we've got cannabis licensing through you, so there's a connection there. These doctors are still dropping people because of the cannabis card and not allowing people to participate in the program. What can we do about that from your perspective?
Well, education's the key, and getting people to understand what the state law is, and nowhere will they find anywhere in the state law that doctors can only prescribe so many opioids, or only doctors can only prescribe opioids if a patient is doing, isn't on marijuana. That's the business of the physicians to help our legislators decide what should policy be. But that's why the opioid legislation was passed a couple of years ago. We had doctors being telling patients, I'm not allowed by this law to prescribe these high doses anymore. And that is absolutely not true. What the new legislation said is that it is recommended that if at all possible to get patients below 100 MME, that's the morphine equivalent. That is best practice. But if that is not possible, then to document your reasons for continuing to prescribe the higher amounts, and if it goes beyond 3 months, to enter into a paying contract with the patient and make sure they understand the risks. That's all it did. Is it said if you're going to continue to prescribe amounts higher than 100 MME, you simply have to document it, discuss it with the patient, and open that contract. But doctors either are being told within their own practices, we're not going to do this. Some of them were given bad information, says you're going to go to jail. OBN's going to put you in jail. DEA will put you in jail if you go over 100 MME. And that is absolutely not the case. There's nothing in state law that would allow us to do that. It is the doctors. And so that's the
Now,
key, is educating our medical professionals of what the law is, that they absolutely can prescribe however they feel is best for their particular patient. Now, Chris, I've talked to doctors who said, I personally will not prescribe opiates to people who are on medical cannabis. that is their choice, but that is not state law. It could be their medical
Right.
practice policy.
Right, but the number that do it for a simple medical reason that they don't believe in cannabis or whatever is so small. Most of them are doing it for what I'm going to mention here, which is, and I only speak from what people tell me. I'm not speaking from what you've said or anything else. But people have told me, and doctors have told me about after this program passed, about a lawyer going around to speaking to many doctors at a time in hotels and in banquet halls and other things like that, and telling them if they wrote a prescription for somebody on with a medical marijuana card, they and that person got hurt, then they would be held liable, not just liability to the license, but criminally liable, and they would be arrested and go to jail. Now, I don't believe it was the OBNDD. I know who was doing this to some degree. I don't know the name of the person, but I kind of know where it came from. We're not going to go down that road. That was 2 years ago. What Lawrence is talking about is this happening at a federal level. And I know you're not federal, and I don't want you to give any state secrets
Right.
here, but it seems like a similar thing is going on federal. So I have a solution that I've just come to right now in talking to you, because I like talking to you. If I could put together groups 30 minutes at a time in a Zoom room or whatever, would you be willing to work with me? Groups of doctors, right? If I can get at least 10, at least 12 of them at a time, would you give a half an hour or an hour of your time once a month to talk to these doctors and tell them what we know to be the law? Because they're hearing it from people bigger than me
Right.
that it's illegal. So there's nothing I can say to convince them. Getting them to call you, I've tried, the phone hasn't rang. So
Right.
that's not working. They just want to believe what they want to believe. But if I can set up the appointments, and my doctor is a pulmonologist, one of my many doctors is a pulmonologist. He's the one who spoke at the interim study. And I know I can get him to help and coordinate this. Lawrence is working with the Pain Society. He's on the board now. Those doctors, he can get doctors through them to get on board with this. Because I know doctors that he and I have spoke to on a regular basis that are back and forth every month,
Sure.
back and forth. We keep thinking this is settled. And then a month later, one of us goes to see a doctor, or someone else we know goes to see the same doctor they've been seeing this whole time. And they flip back to last month's view or the month before, right, when they were all scared and talking about, THC levels and opioid levels. And, so would you be willing to do that if I could put that together?
Oh, we'd be happy to. But it also, and I have for 2 years since that law first passed about the new opioid, the acute versus chronic pain, and being able to keep patients on this longer than 3 months with the pain contract. We've been encouraging any patient that has a doctor who has told them something that they don't believe is accurate to feel free to reach out to us. And we've got this material. We've got a breakdown of the law that we can easily, it's a one-page thing that we send to doctors, and it's been sent out before. And even the medical association and the DOs groups have sent it out to their doctors, and most of them understand that. But there's a few that may not understand it. But the other thing is this. It could be within their own internal practice, and it's just easier on these doctors to say it's state law, thinking that the patient's not going to challenge them. And that's not fair, but that certainly has been our experience, that we've gotten blamed for things that simply are not what the law says.
Right. But if I can contact these doctors and say,
Sure.
I have your solution right here, take it or don't, then we'll determine which ones are, then they can either come back with, sorry, my insurance says no, and then there's nothing we can say at that.
Right. A lot of it could be insurance, could be policy of that particular medical practice.
And it's not that I want to put any of them on the spot. What I can tell you is I've personally witnessed multiple doctors in the last 2 years change their view, change their opinion. So I believe if we just keep pushing, as you say, education, it works. It really works.
Right.
So
right.
I want to offer them that.
Yep. No, absolutely. We can tell them that there's nothing in current law about limits on how many opioids that as long as they can justify it. And there's nothing in state law that says if they're a medical cannabis patient that they can't have opioids. There again, now that may be the doctor's personal preference. As I said, I've talked to doctors who said that they have no problem prescribing opioids to cannabis patients, and I've heard other doctors say that their research they lean towards don't do it. And so again, the problem is there's two piles of research. Both are probably, as they always say, the truth is somewhere in the middle. It could be patient by patient. Some may have had a bad experience, and others were fine. So you can't paint with a broad brush on this issue of are opioids good or bad with cannabis. Again, there's stacks of research show both sides of it, and we stay out of it.
I can tell you, I don't want to force any of them. What I want to do is make sure that those that have even just a sliver of an opening there for some education, I want to be there with that education, ready to pound it in and kick that door open and get some minds changed.
Absolutely.
I tell everybody, one mind a day. That's it. Change one person's mind a day. And whatever your message is, just pound it in somebody every single day. I can assure you, I do it every day. Somebody has to listen to my speech.
Well, and they need to hear it because, like I said, I told you this off air. I've gotten plenty of calls from people who are patients who are crying their eyes out, saying their doctor just fired them and they're in horrible pain. Right. But they believe because of the state law, they can't take those high doses of opiates anymore. And it breaks my heart because there's no reason somebody should suffer because either the doctor simply didn't understand the law and didn't take the time to call us, or the doctors being pressured to fire them. We want to educate the doctors and say, if you truly believe that opioids at this particular level are what's best for that patient, then you can absolutely continue to prescribe at that level as long as you can justify it, have that paying contract in place, and you have that discussion about the risks and the needs with your patients. And so there's absolutely remedies in place that nobody should be having to suffer. And it's not because of the state law, it's because of the lack of information about what that law means.
I know they call you when they're at the end of the rope and they want you to call their doctor and slap their doctor around.
Well, we won't call the doctor, but we do encourage them, let me have the doctor's name and please call the doctor and tell them to call us. And the doctors usually don't, which tells me it might be something internally. It's not just confusion over the state law, because we've had some doctors that called on their own and we walked them through it and they said that I appreciate it. That makes sense. And so, but other doctors are not. And so
they call us when they put a gun to their head.
Yeah.
They call us when they're beyond that point.
It's truly,
that's why we keep doing this.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, as far as DEA and we've got partners in DEA and, going back to 96 when Proposition 215 was passed out in California, we haven't seen this just massive amount of doctors going to jail because on the federal level they prescribed opiates to a marijuana patient and the feds came in, and so I don't think that's going to change now. So we don't want fear keeping people from getting the health care that they need, but we're certainly not.
We have more doctors going to jail just for prescribing opioids.
Right.
They don't have to be prescribing opioids and marijuana. The doctors that are going to jail, that are actually going to jail for writing prescriptions for opioids, are going to jail for writing prescriptions for opioids.
Right.
Doesn't have anything to do with the cannabis.
Right.
And in fact, one of the doctors that sat on this board went to jail recently because he's one of the only ones who was willing to work with patients, willing to give them what they needed.
Yeah.
And so he ended up recently getting arrested. Now they've all kind of scattered. They're all throwing their arms up in the air. They're afraid they're all going to go to jail. It's a real problem. Yeah. It really is.
But for any fear that there's some sort of new federal guidelines that the DEA is going to start clamping down on doctors who prescribe opiates to cannabis patients, that there's just absolutely no truth to that, nothing that we've seen, and certainly not anything that I can see even getting much support anywhere in this country right now.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, even if you can't give us some insider information on that, you can certainly give us the what's really out there and what's really not out there from the federal level. I appreciate that.
Right. Well, and I would think that by now we would have these doctors, screaming in the medical, the cannabis industry, hearing about it and publicizing it. If a doctor was bullied, that doesn't, or misunderstood something a DEA agent said in his or her office in West Virginia 2 months ago, that kind of stuff could possibly happen, but to think there's any sort of a big federal movement to clamp down on doctors prescribing opioids to cannabis patients,
So it's probably more isolated.
it would probably be some sort of an isolated case, because I'd like to hear about it too, because as I said, this goes back to 1996. You're looking at
Right.
this will be the 25th anniversary of medical marijuana in the United States with 215 passing, and you just don't have a lot of cases where you can point to doctors going to
Right.
jail for prescribing opioids to cannabis patients.
Yeah, I don't think Lawrence has come up with one. There may be, but I'll ask him about it later.
I'd
Okay,
love to know the
Mark.
grounds for it, because it'd be hard to find a law that justified doing it. Maybe he punched somebody in the process.
Maybe. Well, Mark, this has been by far the most useful, informative, almost hour you and I have ever spent together. We never do a show this long together. We usually
Well,
say we have the same.
you know, we see these as critical because we don't want to go months at a time with a lot of fear and misunderstanding. So I appreciate you having me on to address some of these. But most important thing, Chris, is I'd like to encourage people, if you've got a question, you can always call us. But you can also go to the Bureau of Narcotics Facebook page and send a private message, and those will come to my desk. And if you say, hey, I didn't want to ask on Facebook Live, but here's a question I've got, pick up the phone or send us a private message, and I will absolutely, or get it to Chris, and Chris can reach out and text it to me, and I can get you an answer through Chris.
Yeah, Lawrence has commented on here. Just a little follow up on what he was saying. He said the doctors were hearing from the DEA that they would lose their DEA license. So, but we'll keep pushing on that. We'll keep getting to the bottom of that. Maybe we can get some more details and.
Yeah. Like I said, if that happened to a doctor somewhere in this country, I'd love to hear the full details, because again, we're just not seeing that, unless it was just some egregious, maybe this doctor had already been warned about not following proper prescribing, and finally somebody,
Well,
said,
I know that wasn't the case. I know about it, but I'll let him fill you in. But
sounds good.
But yeah, we'll follow that up. We'll keep pushing that until we
Yeah.
get to the bottom of it. Okay, Mark, I want to thank you again so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
When's the first day of session? I don't even remember.
February 1st, Monday, February 1st.
You're kidding me.
It'll be here before we know. Yeah, we're here about
My
3 weeks.
surgery is the first. My surgery is the first. I haven't missed an opening day in 3 years.
Well, you can maybe Zoom it. I mean, most of it's going to be Zoom. Probably all of it will be Zoomed anyway, so you can.
Well,
you won't miss a thing.
I was there. I mean, come on, it's important. I like this stuff.
Yeah.
Every opening day is a history. It's a day in history.
Well, and it's going to be exciting too. You and I have spent a lot of time in that building together, and we may not recognize it with all the construction I mean, it's going to be beautiful. It really is. And
yeah, it's funny. The last time I walked through there was with a mask on, and
I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
No, but some of the legislators were going, "Oh, I know who that is. I know who that is," because of the beard. I know who that is. Now I'm gonna be in there. I'll be in there probably not until almost the 1st of March, but I'll be in there with a big neck brace on.
Well, prayers for you that you get relief and restoration, brother.
I'm gonna use it to the best I can. I'm gonna make them feel sorry for me. Get them to let me come sit in the Senate office and talk to them a bunch. Maybe get me a special seat on the floor if I can.
There you
I'm
go.
gonna use this the best I can.
Well, those close parking spots too.
What's that?
Those close parking spots too.
I have bad knees. I've had a handicapped parking for 2 years. It's still good for 3 more years, man. I've had that for a while. I'm already old. Didn't you know that?
Yeah.
Have you not seen me go up and down the steps with the knee brace on?
You look good up there. You look energized.
All
Maybe
right.
You're on a mission, and so I see mission focused up there. So that's awesome.
True. I am on a mission. All right, buddy. I sure appreciate it. Let's talk again soon.
Sounds
okay,
good.
everybody. We're gonna hop off here. I will find something else interesting to talk about next Monday, and I bet we can get Mark back on here. Let's give me about 2 weeks after my surgery, 2 weeks into the session, and we'll get on here and we'll wrestle over some more of this legislation. Again, I will be keeping an eye on you guys this year. I want to make sure that these new powers that you want don't play out somehow with the seed to sale in a way that is a money generator. Sorry,
absolutely,
can't let that happen. So
absolutely, I mean, this is only going to work if we're all working together. Us, OMMA, the industry, the advocates, and the patients. Absolutely, everybody needs a voice in this to make sure we continue to do it right. We're doing it right. We got a few bad actors, but we're doing it right for the most part.
All right, folks, that's it for tonight. Until next week, stay grumpy. I'll see you on the road. See if I can shut this down. Maybe I can't. Oh, there we go. All right, we're out of here.